we're here.
We are here.
This is our first podcast. This is Winning It with the Home Team podcast. I'm Katrina Parlin.
I'm Todd Murphree.
And we are recreation pastor and recreation associate at Lake Church. We serve at the LC Sports and Recreation Center. And we get the joy of using sports as an avenue, really, to share about the good news of Jesus. And so, I'm pumped to be here. This podcast is called Winning It with the Home Team. And what does that even mean? We really want families to succeed. I want my family to succeed. I know that you want your family to succeed. And we work with families. We see families all of the time. And we want families to thrive. And I think God definitely wants families to thrive. He created the family unit. Yeah. And so Winning It with the Home Team podcast is all about how can we empower, how can we get families to think about how to parent in a way that gets the home team to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in fairness, this is one of those Katrina brainchild moments, where she has just a great idea. And the minute that you mentioned this, I was like, yeah, this is right on. It's so needed. I wish that I had this available to me, just through all my experience going through youth sports, both personally and with my children growing up so much. This is a much needed thing. So. Yeah.
So Todd, as you and I talked about this podcast, we got an outline together, but honestly, what business do we have about, telling people or giving people resources on how to win it, with their family?
Yeah. What business do I have telling anybody anything, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's kind of, it goes without saying, but there's experience that you can rely on. And I think for me, listen, I'm in my late 40s now, and I've raised kids. We have 5 kids, and each one of them has gone through different things. Being a coach to them, I played sports my whole life, all the way through high school. And then, as the kids began growing, they showed interest in it. And, before you know it, you're coaching them. And, I'm just now getting out of that season where I'm coaching my kids. They're old enough that I don't have to do that anymore. Don't get to do that anymore, actually. So there's a lot of experience that comes with that. And I feel like with that experience, there's been some successes, and then there's been some failures.
Yeah.
And so I think, for me personally, I can impart some of that wisdom that I've learned both from the successes and the failures.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I don't have 5 kids.
Yeah.
I have a 4.5-year-old. We are just dipping our toes into sports right now. Taya, she played soccer last season. Absolutely loved it. I have a lot to learn from you. I certainly, don't know all that there is to know about youth sports and parenting. Sometimes, like most parents, I feel like I'm just kind of shooting from the hip, right?
Yeah.
But I have worked at the LC, for 16 years and 2 seasons a year, whether that be flag football or soccer or basketball. That equates to like 32 seasons of seeing parents and families come through, our gym and come on the field. And so I've seen a lot of the passion that resides in youth sports from a spectator point of view, also from a parent point of view. And then also just seeing the kids as well. And so I know that we live in a culture that's ever changing, right? Like, your oldest is Cameron, right?
Right.
And so, when he was, going through youth sports, we didn't have phones, right? Like, How old is Cameron?
Yeah, he's 23, almost
23.
24. Yeah.
23. So you have a 23-year-old. How old's Macy?
You're going to put me on the spot to talk about all my kids' ages. Now, Macy's 21, and then, going down, Cole's 19, he's about to be 20. So, yeah, they're in their 20s now, and Cameron almost 24. The world is a different place than it used to be.
Yeah.
It really is. Things change so fast. You're right.
Yeah. Things do change so fast. Macy, she's a professional ballerina. Is that right?
Right. Right.
Talk about, wow, impressive. That's awesome.
Yeah. So Cameron, our oldest, he graduated from the University of Alabama, and I have to say Roll Tide every time I say that.
I'm sorry.
Which, his younger brother Cole is at Alabama now, so Roll Tide again. And then Macy in between them, she's in Orlando. She's living by herself in Orlando. She's, started ballet when she was young, and she moved off when she was 16 years old.
Wow.
Moved to Philadelphia. She was going away for summers for years before that.
Yeah.
And then moved out of our house at 16 to Philadelphia to follow her dance career, which lessons learned. Talk about sports parenting. I go back to, I think I've learned more from ballet than I have from sports. But you know what? There's a lot of similarities there too. Because it's not just about the sport or the activity as much as it is, and I think this is what this podcast gets to the most is about the relationships that we're building with our kids and with our families. And so when you go to bring it full circle to, our experiences, everybody has unique experiences and we all learn from things, that we go through. So whether it be my kids or your experience at the LC, because that's how we originally met years and years ago is at the LC. I've seen very clearly how involved you are. You're like, sometimes I feel like you're the mayor of Arlington.
Oh, no, definitely not the mayor of Arlington, nor do I want to be the mayor of Arlington.
But that's how heavily engaged you are in the families, right? And I think people see how much you care. And certainly my family did when we started here, 12 years ago. And so that's kind of how our relationship started where, watching how much you poured into those kids, and that caught the attention of my wife and I.
Yeah.
And so then things just kind of progressed from there.
Yeah. Yeah, we met through sports, right? I was the rec pastor there. You guys came through. We can't decide if it was flag football or basketball.
Can't remember.
Yeah,
too many sports seasons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Too many sports seasons. But I remember specifically, Todd, you as a basketball coach.
Yeah.
There was a game that you did not agree with at all. And I remember just the justice that was in your face about wanting your kids, to get the right calls and you just felt like it wasn't that. And so, man, that's something that I appreciate about you is just your passion in your level of justice.
Yeah. And I appreciate you using the word justice instead of anger. I feel like.
Well, no, I mean, that's where anger comes from, right? Like we feel like we're not justified, in our actions.
Right.
I very vividly remember you sitting on that bench outside the gym, looking into those windows. And I knew that you were, that you wanted something better for your kids.
Yeah.
And that's why, I think that's my first memory of you.
Yeah. And, from that, gosh, my family has been involved in your life and vice versa for, since then. And that's what I think, again, the beauty of this podcast is we see the value of relationship. I know my wife has walked alongside with you in certain areas. And, ultimately it led to me even getting a job at the LC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what relationship does. So I think as we go through this podcast and we talk about some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, we see that there's just tremendous value in being involved and in being involved in the right ways. And so some of the things we're going to talk about is how do we take parenting, how do we take marriage, some of those hot topics and really work on how do we be better at those things. For our kids, for our marriages, for each other, for our friendships. We're really going to dive into that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. When we talk about winning it with the home team, we also, want to acknowledge that this is for the home unit, right? So whether your home unit is, you have a spouse and either, one kid like I do or 5 kids like Todd does, or whether you're a single parent, or whether you're a grandparent, and you've got kids that you find yourself now raising, we believe that you can win. And that's not a sense of perfection because we're not going to win every day, right?
Right.
But there's small steps that I think that we can be intentional on taking to make sure that we are raising kids the right way.
So I got to ask you, this is not scripted, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing this out at you.
Okay, here we go.
Like I said, we've known each other for 12 years. Do you have a favorite team or season thinking back over the years of whether it be basketball or flag football or soccer that sticks out to you the most?
I don't have a particular season that rings as my favorite, more so as I have stories that involve relationships that are just hilarious. So I won't be able to tell this story completely just because of the nature of it, but the Dunns, Rhonda and Patrick Dunn, it was basketball season. And man, the Dunns are just always trying to, find reasons to make me blush or kind of poke holes in what I was thinking. So their youngest, Paxton, he was, I think he was like 3 at the time. And they were sitting on the opposite side of the scores table. And of course I was taking score. Or at least pretending like I was taking score. And Paxton, the 3-year-old, comes over to me and just whispers something that I can't even say. Rhonda and Pat, if you're listening to this podcast, you know what I'm talking about. And I just lost it. Yeah. But no, I don't have a favorite sports season because all of my stories involve the people that I was working with, you know? And so.
You know what's fascinating to me is, this kind of gets into a little bit of my background because I was in police work for a long time.
Yep. In your previous life.
My previous life.
Yep.
And even before that, being involved in football for so long, that was such a huge part of me. And people always ask when, I recently retired from police work and they ask, do you miss it? And I always say, I do sometimes, but really it's the relationships that I miss the most. And the same thing with football. The whole reason I got into police work in the beginning was because I missed the camaraderie of the locker room. And I wanted to feel that again somewhere. And I wanted to work in a place where you still had that kind of relationship ability. And so that's a lot of the reason why I got into police work. And now that I'm out of that, I look back on the memories, and there are a lot. There are a lot of stories. That's probably a different podcast, by the way. But the memories I have the most are of the people. Even just the stories of life and death type situations. What I remember most is the people that I was with, and so I ask you that question because I feel like we probably feel the same way, that it's about those moments. You're not going to remember the scores of every basketball game, but you do remember a Parker Dunn coming up to you and doing something like that because that family means something to you.
Yeah.
And I think as we go through, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're still with us after the first however many minutes we've been doing this,
14 minutes.
Yeah, we're going to be full of these things. We're going to be full of stories. And there are a lot of people that I know have touched your life and have touched my life that, we can draw off of not just our experiences, but theirs too.
Yeah.
Right. And even to the point where we're bringing those people in.
Right. For some guests. Yeah.
And talking about it because we don't know everything, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Nope.
So, we learn things as we go. Police work taught me a lot. It really opened my eyes. I started when I had just turned 23. And I really learned that I was sheltered because I was one of those kids who was all about sports. And so I listened to what my coaches told me. So I did my homework and I didn't do drugs and I didn't drink because I was afraid of my coaches and my dad. And once I got into police work, I realized, man, there's a whole different world out there. And so, 25 years later, wow, there really is. And so I saw a lot of, talking about families and the home life, there's a lot of sadness that I saw going through that. Some of that I took home with me because it's hard not to. And the reality is that it's there, and we have to find ways to navigate that. My faith is, I can't even tell you how important that was to me over the last 25 years. Some of the stuff that I saw was just, incomprehensible. But there is an adverse effect on the home life when bad things happen. And so I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about isn't just stories, but how do you navigate that stuff? And again, we don't have all the answers, but it's a good place for us to come and talk about our experiences and invite people in here to talk about what they've experienced as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think that's another reason why we talk about sports and we love sports so much is you mentioned that the world can be such a sad place.
Yeah.
And sports provides that opportunity for a kid to get out of his or her circumstance, whether that be a bad circumstance at home or at school, and just let it all out, be on the court. And the same is true for a coach. A coach has such the ability to impact a kid's life in a positive way. And so that's, kind of bleeding into what we'll talk about this season is the virtues that we'll cover during our basketball league. Basketball season is here presently. And so we essentially have taken the virtues that the coaches will be talking about with their kids, with their players, and we want to address them in regards to parents. And so, the first one is win it. Win it with teamwork. We talk about, what does it look like in the home to make sure that we're using teamwork, whether it be, a spouse or whether it be just you and your kids or you and your grandkids. How do you formulate a plan in which you are striving to win it just with your team at home, right?
Right.
And then the next one is win it with sacrifice. Man, if parenting isn't a sacrifice, I don't know what is, right? And so we dig into that in regards to winning it with sacrifice. And then we talk about winning it with sportsmanship, how the attitude really matters in how you go about parenting, how you handle situations as a parent, whether in regards to sports or other things like that. And then we talk about pressing on with focus. We'll talk a little bit about in the next episode about winning it with teamwork and how you want to put up boundaries or you want to try to put up boundaries. And then, how do you press in regards to focusing on what really matters in those boundaries?
Right.
And then we know that parenting is, it's a long game. It's a long game. And so we talk about pressing on with endurance. When things, life happens. As I'm sure that, with 5 kids, you've realized.
Way too much life happens.
Yes. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what you think you've done right or wrong. And it just, sometimes it just comes down to, did they wake up on the right side of the bed?
Right. Very true.
We talk about win it with or press on with endurance.
Yeah.
And then, everybody loves a good comeback story. And so we talk about just the passion that is involved in sports and in parenting. We talk about some of the passions, that can get, carried away in some areas. And then ultimately, kind of how our faith revolves around all of this. Whether you believe that Jesus is the Son of God or not, there's an element of faith that plays a huge role in this. And so, we'll take all of those topics and just kind of flesh them out in regards to parenting.
Yeah. And, there's so much content to go over, weeks and weeks of content, and we'll, kind of pare it down to 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how long our basketball season runs. And so we're going to run this thing, and we're just going to see where it takes us. And our basketball league is important to us. And so in this podcast, we're going to discuss what's going on during, the week with our league. We're going to talk about our players of the week. We're going to talk about our coaches of the week.
Yeah.
We're going to give props to those kids and coaches that are out there working their tails off to be better. So this is, if if you're listening to this podcast, you're going to hear about your son, right? You're going to hear about your spouse that's coaching a team, or, your grandson or your granddaughter. We're going to talk about those kids because we're proud of them.
Yeah.
This is a place where we can celebrate those victories. I mean, that's what we do it for, right? Like we come to work every day because we want to see the smiles on those kids' faces. We want to see their growth.
100%, yeah.
And so this gives us an opportunity. And this podcast will also give you an opportunity to have a little insight into, kind of behind the scenes of what it is that we do, how we don't kill each other on a daily basis. If you want to learn how, my daughter started in ballet, you're probably going to hear about it on this podcast. If you want to learn how we get French fries out of a child's seat from Cy when he was younger, you'll probably hear about it. Who knows what kind of stories we're going to tell.
Yeah.
But it's going to be fun. And I think, like I said, it's just a much needed thing for people to hear, because here's the big thing for me is we fail on a daily basis. And sometimes what helped me through parenting and helped me through marriage is seeing, hey, I'm not the only person who fails.
Yes. Praise the Lord. Yeah.
Right. Woo. And so it's good sometimes to be reminded that we're normal. Yeah. We're human. Yeah. We're not perfect. And so if you want to hear a lot of human stories, I got them.
With 5 kids, you got them, right?
Yeah.
And even with 4.5 years, I have a few too.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. And you've got marriage stories. I've got marriage stories. I don't know how I've been able to keep a wife for, almost 22 years. Yeah. But it is what it is. We're going to share those stories, and we're going to get down and in depth in that stuff. And hopefully, you guys can pick something up along the way. And hopefully you can just share a laugh with us and have some fun too.
Yeah, we won't take ourselves too seriously.
I don't think we ever do.
No, I can't. That's for sure. So.
No doubt.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Please tune in to our podcast. We would love to hear your feedback as well. Yeah. We would love any feedback that you have. This is our first episode, so I think it went okay.
Yeah, I feel like there needs to be a sign off or something. Like we should have our own tailor-made. I don't know. Maybe we'll develop that along the way.
Yeah, maybe we will. So, all right, guys. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.